Ja, vielen Dank für die Anmoderation.
Hello, thanks so much for facilitating and for this opportunity to be here before this very beloved audience. I would like to present the two ladies to my left and right. Olga is CEO of Telekom Mobility Solutions, and she is a very freshly born Germany's most impressive woman. 2022, like next Germany's top model 2022. It sounds very inspiring. And Narim is author. Mobility in Movement, Mobilität in Bewegung is the title of her publication, and head of strategy programs by Cariat. So call them strategic programs, that's okay.
Cariat ist, für den, der es nicht weiß,
and Cariat, for those who don't know, is working in the VW group. So mobility is very important and is moving and making us think, all of us. Olga, let's start with you. Telekom moves 22,000 vehicles in their fleet, and also many service vehicles out of them. And you have written on your motto, you want to mobilize Germany as a digital player, and to mobilize and digitalize Germany. And I would say Germany is lagging behind one or the other country. How can you make sure that you can digitalize Germany and to make sure that you can move into a mobility change around or U-turn, so to say? Well, yeah, it's quite crazy, I would say. Well, first of all, we have Telekom car, and you started with 6,000 and also company cars. I think
Dienstwagen-Thema ist ein...
Well, this topic of service cars and company cars is a society topic and not only a telecom topic, and I wouldn't leave it like that with telecom, and it just mirrors the society. In telecom mobility, we don't do anything else than just mirroring society. And this is really a topic, and this has to do with many aspects. It's the cultural topic, and we have to talk openly about certain things. I mean, company cars, this is something which is still a prestige topic for many of them, and it's a solution topic because it's infrastructure. I also have to go to my office 40 kilometers, and it doesn't work always with others, and I also have a daughter, so it's also a generation topic, we have to say, to be honest. I mean, we are Telekom, for example, so digitalization, etc. How do we feel about that? We don't do many things differently, like networking, worlds of living, and this is what we are doing in mobility. We are administrators, for example, and we are also networking for TV, for example. We are first place or second place, but we also make mobility as a third place concerning importance.
Was da noch bei rauskommt, das machen wir später.
And
Nari, die
now we talk about that. The change, for example, in drives that we are discussing all around is also moving everyone. The demand shuttle, like supply shuttles, for example, everything is just congesting the roads. How can we make sure that mobility, as we wish it to be, to have no traffic jams, etc., that this becomes really a great event and that becomes a pleasure, and that it brings more benefits than they do today? I mean, mobility on one hand, yeah, that's also great about this topic. It's a totally emotional topic, because there is hardly anyone nowadays who does not have to do with mobility, for example, somewhere and somehow. But the problem is that mobility has been very rigid. There are only very few different solutions in the past, and also on the roads it was more against each other than being together with each other. And if we look at that, I mean, mobility is so interesting. If you look at Berlin, for example, all the most different means of traffic and of mobility, for example, we have many more possibilities to live mobility mobility, more on demand. If I want to be quick, I have to go there from here to there. I can take a taxi, for example, but I can take a scooter. I can also, for example, share certain trips. I don't need my own car. I also can grab my bike to go to the new S-Bahn station, for example. Mobility is becoming much more important, but there are so many things that are happening in our mind, and there are so many ways of rethinking that we have to do. And if we do that as Telekom, for example, we say we don't need our own cars, we can share trips, for example, and we are not going to be as good, but perhaps even better and quicker, for example, and to watch out for more ecological aspects, for example, to reduce CO2 emissions, etc. And you might perhaps even get to know one or the other nice guy or girl. That's not bad. But this is where we have to go, and this is what we see in many places in Germany, and we have to make sure that we don't forget other parts in Germany. And I have another question, for example, to give you some more discussions. For example, I mean, to get to know more people, that's great. Get to know more nice people, that's great. But we are also creatures of habit, for example. I mean, mobility is something, I don't know whether we always want to share it, and we want to have our commodity. It has to be nice. I mean, yes, for all of us, it's a bit difficult for us to get known to new habits, for example, to get familiar with news. But perhaps for one family, this was familiar, but that is not so good in the past, for example, because driving around is not so great anymore. If we look at Paris, for example, so many things are happening, and driving by car is made more and more difficult, and streets are congested, and you are much quicker by feet or with a bike in Copenhagen, Barcelona, in Berlin, or all around us, also in Hamburg. Many things are changing. I think the trends are definitely there. And I think for some people it's going to be easier than for others. Now, let me come with the taxation of cars, the e-cars and plug-in models, for example. I think they pay less taxes than combustion engines, for example, which is great because we want to bring these cars. But who is going to pay for that? Is that just who is going to pay the taxes? And let me make sure that I don't get hit on my head by my boss. But definitely, we say that technology definitely is right, and e-mobility is the right way forward. And for me, it's really absolutely important to give you some incentives, for example, to make sure that it becomes accepted in society, that people are not afraid of that. But this is also my personal opinion. We also have to make sure, for example, that mainly mobility is made available for everyone, that is going to be financeable for everyone, that we are not going to exclude anyone because the money is not there. Then we need alternatives. This might be public transport, for example. That might be also, dear Olga, a mobility platform. Now, let's talk once again about taxation. I wouldn't have to talk openly about that. That's why Republica, for example, if in Berlin you talk about company cars and all that, then the people look at you a bit differently. And if you are somewhere else, people look differently at you. And I'm administering 6,000 company cars, and taxation does not help to get people away from company cars. Everything's clear. We want to have less cars. We want to share everything. But here, the government does not really help us. So I would have wished that the mobility budget would have been taxed a bit more easier, and other options would have been taxed better than company cars. So theory and practice are two things. So yes, we need more regulation and a different regulation. We have to make sure certain things. We want to have shared mobility, and it should be supported by the government. So you say here, you from the Telekom group, you need the support by politics to have a better regulation and to have a better implementation of mobility in your group? Well, yes, there are some facts. In Germany, there are roughly 48 million people working. 48 of them, million of them, they are not in the traffic jam because they want to get some cake or some bread because they go to their work. So I think we all, employees and employers, can do a lot to change mobility, but we can't do it all on our own. And I can also also tap on my own shoulder. We have shuttle on demand, and shared drivers, etc. It would be great if regulations and politics would support us, and we need a more framework. And the public transport bicycle, for example, would have some tax benefits more than a car. It's mere mathematics, for example, because if sustainable mobility, which is beneficial for the employee, for example, and if you pay less taxes than the bad combustion engine, you would have more levers at your hand. Yes, and there are even tougher statistics from 3.8 cars. 30% are company cars that are registered cars in Germany. So I think the plan is very clear. So the government is going to be a game changer. And what do I have? Well, we have the 8th of June. So since the 8th of June, we have the Neun-Euro-Ticket in Germany. So for the first time, also public transport gets subsidies, that we also have a possibility that we make it affordable for each and everyone, so that everyone can benefit from that. So of course, some people are also complaining. I also have been sitting in some very full trains, regional trains, but still it's great, and I hope it's great and that it's going to go on like that, and that we will take over for more people for joining in on driving by train. I mean, this Neun-Euro ticket, I also tried it out, and it's not always great, but I think it's a great possibility to show that it works. And also, I also had some traffic jams in trams and local trains, but I think it's still great, although you need a lot of preparation. So we are going to see what 3 months are going to show you. It's perhaps not going to stay at €9. Perhaps this local ticket is going to be a bit more expensive, but it's going to be okay. We all talk about mega apps and superstar apps, etc., for example. And how you want to call it. Everyone wants to have them, everyone wants to use them, but no one has them, at least in Germany. Because we look at these mega apps like Amazon, for example, Facebook, WhatsApp, Nishat, Alibaba, for example, all these mega apps. They work better abroad, but not in Germany. Why is that so? And how can we make sure that we get such a mega app on the road in Germany? Well, first of all, I'm not a fan of mega apps. I think it should not be one app manages everything. We need a sound competition on the market. And you and we and everyone as a final customer will have to decide which app is best at the end of the day. But the problem is somewhere else. So also in Germany, we have in Berlin, for example, Yelby, which is a great star in Germany. But the problem is networking between the cities. The jams do not come in the cities, but outside the city. So networking has to take place outside the city, and mobility is not an end in itself. I go somewhere to meet a purpose. I go to grab my daughter or to go to the office, for example, as long as it's not clarified. For example, how do I get my daughter to somewhere to get my purchases done, to go to my office? The things are not clarified. So my answer would be, and which are the vehicles, for example, networking of mobility with non-mobility world. This is important. How can I switch? I want to know how my problem can be solved. And therefore, one solution would be definitely a mobility app. I have to ask you once again, I think a mobility platform is definitely what we need. We are looking at how do we get from A to B and C best, for example, what are our best opportunity. And I think it's really great that you build up these things. But I also see some challenges. For example, platforms, they are super important. For example, how can we make sure that we don't come to a selection or certain chosen, for example, opening bracket, those who pay most, closed brackets, but to all transport mobility that we have. That's one thing. And the second thing about platforms, we have to make sure that we don't only address one target group, which is super digital, who has 2 or 3 or 4 credit card numbers, but that we also get to people who are not so fit with apps. They do not pay through PayPal, and they don't know how to do that. And third, that we also make things understandable, because many people, as the studies have shown, many people are not so much afraid, like being afraid of local transport, but they are afraid that they won't make it through the traffic chain. They don't know, where does bus 381 go there? Am I going to go out on the wrong stop? If we get the people to feel safe, if we make them not so afraid of things, and if we lose their worries, they will become much more mobile. And also to show this mobility intermodally and in a networked way, that's the mobility platform of all enabler, for example, to make it fit for society. That's very important for us. If we look at all that, and you talked about our target group, for example, which might not have an access to digital devices, for example, how can we manage that switch? Because if one train comes late, for example, and how do I get my next bus connection? And how do I go to my village, for example, where there is no train connection, for example? This only works digitally. Yeah, it's a super interesting topic. And for this book, I looked at one project, for example, mainly about rural mobility. There are so great digital mobility offers, for example, very innovative ones. And you have to think different. We cannot simply develop a great technology, for example, and bring it somewhere and to say, now have fun, my guys. This does not work. I would even say that a success of a new innovation only works technically if society accepts it as a whole. So if we have a wonderful new offer, for example, in different aspects, if we want to make people enthusiastic, then you have to explain the product. Then you have to go to local associations, rural associations. You have to talk to the people. You have to let them wonder. And I talked a lot about that, and I heard a lot about it, and people call afterwards. I mean, today the bus was really great. So the bus driver really parked very well. I mean, these are points that you have to take into account. Mobility is for people. It's not only technology that you simply put there and then people react to it or not. Coming back to why it does not work at us, digital solutions, for example. What I see, there are really some people, very few or not so few people, from mobility providers, for mobility providers have been developed. They have developed tools. And the question is, why don't we think from the customer side? We think about your perspective, for example, from your and mine perspective. But I think there are some companies and also Telekom, it doesn't have to be, there are also some very good other groups who have learned for many years to really understand what the customers want and how do I think for customers. If I concentrate on mobility as such, then my needs as a customer won't be met. And I would go even further to say we have to take into account the needs of everyone. And our society is so diverse. We have so many diverse needs, and therefore we have so diverse demands on mobility. But at the moment, we are only covering one part. Those who love to go by car, perhaps who go by bus, or who like to have the S-Bahn, for example. Those who have, for example, impediments, for example, who don't use public traffic, who are afraid of using it by night, or children or elderly people who are not able to go by themselves. They have the most individual needs and demands in society that we do not cover efficiently by far. I can only agree because I'm absolutely with you, because we wanted to be critical. But in Germany, for decades, or at least for 1 century, for example, we have been overtaken by cars. And the classical OEMs, for example, they made it very well to sell their product to the customer in a tailor-made way, for example. And that's a bad habit that we have. How can we make sure that this product comes to the customer by saying, okay, I'm going to switch and I'm going to say goodbye to my car? I mean, that's the problem of the hen and the egg. You have the same problems with the SUVs, for example. Why do we produce SUVs? Because they're still bought and purchased. That's a problem about them. I mean, VW also with Goyan, they are also trying to offer a right pooling offer, and hopefully they're going to start driving autonomously and also with WeShare next year. So I think alternative offers have to be very easy and intuitive for people to like it. If you look at Berlin and Hamburg, there are incredibly lots of possibilities, for example. But let's look beyond that. The also medium-sized and small cities, let's not forget them. We also have to make sure that we take everyone on board, and we have to make it possible. Each and everyone has different preferences, and they are all okay. We are going to support and promote everything. You're going to have seamless changes from one to the other thing. That would be ideal because we are so diverse in our society. Why should our mobility not be also as diverse as we are? Okay, don't be dogmatic. I mean, mobility is as free as we are. So it's not only car or no car. And if I have a car, I'm not a bad guy or girl. The question is, how do I use the car? In Germany, for example, that's a car story. I come from Ukraine. That was a public transport country, and now with 35 years I came to Germany. I said, now I made it. Now I bought my own car. But we have to take a step back. We don't have to convince the people who already have a car, but we have to offer new things to people who want to use other mobility devices. I live in Cologne and I work in Bonn. I wanted to go without my cars. I needed at the beginning 2.5 hours to go by to my job. I would have liked to do car sharing and my job ticket. Yes, I do that. I spend a lot of money on there, but this is not only true to Cologne, but if we look at rural areas, it's even worse. I think we have to invest a lot to offer things to people who really want to drive differently. And then they are going to switch and to change.
Ich sehe die Mobilität sehr weitläufig.
I think mobility is very far-sighted. And I look beyond the frontiers of Germany and also see one or the other one who can make things happen. We in Germany can also make a lot of things happen. And we do a lot for us and for mobility in the future. And we do it in various areas at VW, for example, at Telekom. We are all doing, and many startups are doing a lot of things. Why can't we create alliances and a cooperative working together to find joint solutions for each and everyone? Olga, I know that you also, for example, together with public transport, the ÖPNV in Germany, you are trying to find new solutions. But wouldn't it be an idea to do something together with VW, for example? Yes.
Also, es ist auch, glaube ich, ein bisschen Kulturthema und
I think it's also a cultural topic and a topic of survival. At the end of the day, for example, it would be really great if in Germany you all would both move and say, for example, I mean, yes, the car is going to become a mobile phone. We know how to steer it and how to work with it. With VW, Mercedes, call them as you want. Let us work together to use our know-how and also use the know-how of car providers and even further the public transport providers to bundle our forces. And this is not happening. We are regulating and we are doing it because each and everyone has their responsibility for employees, and there are many ones, and VW and many other groups, for example, they do their dealings and further training, etc. They build up their own ecosystems. And I think as a country, we are losing speed. And GAFA and also other mega apps will become quicker. I'm sad about that. I think we as Telekom, we have learned how to develop business models. We always have to adapt because we are in constant competitions, and the apps that we are building up. What's the app? It's the networking of mobility with non-mobility products. It's bundling. We are open. And we are also asking other public transport companies to join in. So you are basically open. Yes, we are publicly open. I think we need these bold and courageous moves because the times of stability are over. No, I have to contradict. I don't think that we are so much lagging behind. For example, in some places we are. But if we look at the last months, for example, if we look at what is happening, Germany is the first country who has published a law on autonomous driving. That's really grand. I mean, we are the first country globally also in on the road, for example, and only in certain areas and with certain regulations, but to pilot autonomous driving on the road. And this will give us the possibility to improve a lot autonomous driving. And then we have to look at 2025 plus, for example. We have the first trials now in very small restricted areas, but this is going to be an enormous game changer. And there, of course, we also need corporations, for example, and it's going to make it possible to change the way that we are living, in brackets also like relations to further locations, for example, how we live, how we think, and how we move. This is going to change. Nari and Olga, unfortunately, we have to close. I'm already getting signs, but nevertheless, I would like to hear your statements of the mobility of the future, for example. How does it look like? And with one or the other impulse to our listeners, for example. And what would you wish for the future? Nari, start again. Now, I wish that mobility of the future becomes much more diverse and colorful, but it starts with all of us individually. So with all of us, we think in our own brackets, for example. We always prefer the means of transport that we are using today and not the other ones. So let's work on that. Let's open up and let's make mobility as farsighted and as diverse and colorful as we are. Oh, goodness. What can I add on top? I wish to have a simple and comfortable mobility, for example, which is needs oriented, that I can use whenever I need it and want to use it, and what meets my vision of freedom.
Also die Mobilität der Zukunft, vernetzt.
So mobility of the future, networked, fair, just, and mainly sustainable, and for all. That is very important. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Nari, Julian, and thank you to all our listeners.